What's up, buddies? It's Concert Buddy. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Vinyl Community Podcasts, either the audio version or if you're watching on my YouTube channel, Concert Buddy, Buddie, on YouTube. I really appreciate you for taking your time to give this experience a shot. This particular episode is one I'm really excited to share with you. I took some time to sit down for a conversation with another member of the vinyl community on YouTube, Tone Scott. And of course, we're going to talk about record collecting publicly on YouTube, all that kind of stuff in the vinyl community. But I also wanted to pick the brain of Tone for another reason, and that's because part of this series of conversations I'm doing calling Collecting from the Inside, Tone has a long and illustrious career in the recording and music industry. And so I was very curious to kind of see how that potentially influenced his collecting ways or his opinions of listening and hearing music and how he identifies, that type of experience on his level. All that said, I hope you're going to find this experience and this conversation really enjoyable. I did. Hopefully Tone did too. I'm pretty sure he did. I'm going to leave links below for some more information, not only on this channel, but also he is a contributing editor to GOLDMINE Magazine. And if you've been collecting for any length of time, you're probably familiar with GOLDMINE. It's one of the longest running music publications, not just about record collecting, but music publications, right up there with Rolling Stone in the world. And so Tone has a, I believe, bi-weekly contribution in 2 different columns for GOLDMINE. And it's really exciting stuff. So we get into all that. Anyway, long-winded way of saying, Tone Scott, great conversation coming up. And I appreciate you spending your time, your most valuable commodity, here listening and watching Vinyl Community Podcasts. Check it out.
Welcome in to the Vinyl Community Podcasts.
Welcome back, buddies. It's Concert Buddy back here on Vinyl Community Podcast. I have a wonderful guest today. If you're not familiar, you're going to get familiar real quick. One of my favorites on YouTube and somebody I've really enjoyed watching from that meeting, but also getting to know here lately off of YouTube, and we'll kind of get into that. It's Mr. Tone Scott. Tone, thanks for joining us.
So, Chance, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing real good. I'm really excited we can lock in this time and talk, man. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Good. Yeah, me too. I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. The title of this piece is Collecting from the Inside, and we'll kind of get into your background because, like we talked about beforehand off camera, I think there's probably more question of what you haven't done in the industry versus what you have done because it's very robust. But we'll kind of circle back to that. But let's kind of kick it off. Where I learned about you and where I started getting to know you is YouTube and the YouTube vinyl community.
Right.
How did that start? Did you, were you kind of like me? Were you a lurker and watching other people's videos and then decided, hey, I'm going to do this? And if so, what were some of those channels that you used to watch that kind of was a call to action to be like, yeah, I'm going to try this too because I've got some records, some CDs I want to talk about.
Right. Well, I kind of did lurk for a while. No, actually not even that long. I lurked for a little while before I started to actually comment. So I would just kind of look, and it was surprising because I think I just happened upon it haphazardly. It wasn't like I was searching for other people to talk about records. I was just on YouTube, and I think the first channel that I watched, I don't watch anymore, but was Derek Higgins.
Okay, yeah.
That's where I kind of got introduced to the concept of the vinyl community. And when I realized it was a thing by watching his channel, because it was spoken about a lot, vinyl community, I was like, what the hell is the vinyl community?
Sure.
So I think I searched vinyl community, and I found a few channels, and it was early on. I mean, it was, at least 10 years ago.
Wow.
So
okay.
the vinyl community at that point had already been going from what I've researched and talked with people about, people like, Brandon, Mr. Hall of Fame, and some of the people who really pioneered the vinyl community. Channels like Memphis Vinyl Jim and the Misses, Jim and April aren't really doing videos anymore. They were the pioneers, and those are some of the first channels that I started watching. Paul Wester, Brock Pita. When I started commenting, his channel was one of the ones that I believe I first commented on.
Okay.
And he started following me right away, even though at that time I didn't have any videos pertaining to vinyl community. It was just videos totally based on my career. It was jam-packed with, career stuff, studio sessions, whatever, concerts, whatever, backstage at a concert, whatever. He started following me, and he got familiar with me, and he's the one who kept nudging me and nudging me and nudging me and urging me, telling me, you got to make videos, you got to make videos. And I think I commented for like 2-3 years minimum before I even thought about making a video. Yeah.
Cool. And so then, what was it? Was there one thing, or was you were just drawn to want to try this for yourself? Were you looking for more connection within the community? Because like commenting can get you so far, and you can connect up to a level with certain creators. But I found once you start doing it yourself, it's like a whole nother level of connectivity, and you get exposed to more creators and folks of different backgrounds and stuff, which we'll kind of talk about in a second. But was that your experience as well?
Yeah, it was part of it. And I think, because up until that time, I mean, I've been collecting records literally my entire life. My dad was a collector. I kind of started out as a junior, collector and whatnot. But even as a kid, I would take really good care of my records. I would take good care of my dad's records. I mean, I collected. But to call myself a serious collector, when I was a teenager, I was pretty much into the lifestyle of being a collector, sleeving my records, even back then.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff, keeping the dust off and cleaning them properly, researching how to clean them properly. And back then, of course, as a kid, there was no internet. And so I had to get books and magazines and Stereophile magazine and Absolute Sound and all of that stuff I would read because I could find out a bit about how to take care of records that way. And, I was exposed to high-end audio as a kid because, again, my dad also was a stereophile. And, I got into high-end audio as a kid, and I understood that sort of niche of being an audiophile or whatever.
Yeah.
And but it was part of it. Up until that time, you could only really talk shop at the record store or with your buddies who were collectors, and you would just sit around and talk about records. You would have listening sessions, you talk about records. When I stumbled upon the vinyl community, it was like, okay, here's all of that talk shop at my fingertips. And it was like, it was great to comment, but I wanted to, like I said, that was part of it. The other part of it was I wanted to show off some records.
Sure,
I had some fucking badass records in my collection, and I knew I could show stuff because the high I got wasn't really showing off the records. It was being exposed to stuff that I didn't know about. Yeah. That's where my high came from because, yeah, I've been collecting for almost my entire life, but there's billions of records out there, and I don't know it all, and I loved learning. So I also wanted to be one to teach people as well and have somebody say, wow, I didn't know that. And so that kind of fueled the fire too. And that's kind of why I decided, you know what, Paul's right. Baracapito is right. I need to start making videos. And I did.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I did a lot of lurking and a lot of learning, honestly. Through other people's videos, it was learning best practices, it was learning about, different types of sleeves. Like I grew up collecting baseball cards, you know what I mean? So I was already kind of predisposed to take care of your stuff. But right. Am I doing it the best way? Learning about people. I had no idea people kept their records behind the jacket. You know what I mean? Like all those kind of things. But also exactly what you're talking about, Tone, is teaching things I've learned, not even from YouTube or not even from reading, the forums or what have you, is sharing best practices. Because I think it goes both ways. Sometimes it's a very one-sided relationship with some particular channels, and that's fine. They have different aims. But what I really like doubling down on is the back and forth, the community piece, but also learning and sharing best practices, because to me that's essential if you're really going to have something. Like you said, before the YouTube or internet or any of that stuff, the only place you could really talk shop is either with people you knew who were collectors or like people at the record store. So the ease and the access has definitely been something I think has really sprung the hobby forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up best practices, because even though that there are many ways to care for your collection and your record, and some of it is subjective,
Yep.
But there are good ways, and then there are better ways. And so it's great to see how other people handle their collections.
Yep.
It's also great to see how people curate their collections, because people curate differently too. So it's
For sure.
It's interesting, and it's a learning experience. To anybody who thinks that they're just a know-it-all and they've got it all down pat, I don't think so.
You can always learn, right? I mean, that's
Always learn from everybody. I've learned stuff from you. Your channel. See, what I admire about you is what I've learned is how somebody who has been in it in such little time can become such a star.
Oh, come on.
I remember when you first kind of started, and I'm like, okay, this guy, I don't know his name yet, but it's like, and I'm getting tired of calling him Buddy. But I watched you really shoot your channel, or shoot. It's not even about subscribers, but just shoot your notoriety, because I think you're very well respected. So that's I'm like, okay, that's a great way to do it, because I haven't really focused on growing my channel. I've just focused on putting out videos when I want to, and I try to give more and more. Not like I'm thinking people are craving more and more of tone, but only because I want the interaction. I love the interaction. I want people to watch my videos. And anybody, again, who says, "Oh, I don't care if anyone watches my videos or not," you're just a liar.
No, it's
You're
stone
full.
cold.
Everybody wants people to watch their videos, or else they wouldn't be doing it. I want people to watch because I want the camaraderie.
Yep.
So so that's what that's about. That's
No, 100%. Took the words out of my mouth, because I think it's easy to get caught up in the analytics of this YouTube thing about subscriber count and views and all that. But to me,
right.
I think I'm sure that's part of it, because we do want to be seen. Because while we're not getting paid to do this, I don't know about you, I'm not getting paid for it, right? But it's
not on this channel. But
not.
yeah,
but it's
talk about something in a minute that again I'm going to be revealing some things. So
perfect. Yeah. No, but the camaraderie is the main thing. That's the thing that I would say in a year plus of doing the video piece, doing the YouTube, my face on camera, outside
right.
of the trolls, you learn everything, right? But I would say that the biggest learning was that reach that you're talking about, right? Because I've actually have learned more new channels in the last, let's call it 15 to 18 months from doing YouTube and videos myself than I did in the previous 5 to 8 years of just lurking and watching videos, right? So and that's been, to me personally, it sounds like the same to you. It's been more rewarding, that piece of the connection and getting to know people, and especially when you get to meet up with people. Like I know Brandon and you met up. Brandon's 15 minutes down the road from me. You know what I mean? But meeting up with people is like it's just awesome.
Yeah, it is, and I've made bona fide, tangible friendships. People who I've put my arms around.
Yep.
People who have given hugs, given handshakes to, sat face to face, had meals with, spend countless hours on the phone with, spend countless hours sending messages or emails, or I have bona fide, tangible friendships now over all of this time, and it's great. And there are people who I don't have bona fide, tangible friendships with that I would love to meet up with.
Sure.
And create a friendship with, because I like them as people. I gel with their personality, and they would be great people to know. So.
Well, I'm glad you. Well, same. So I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I've noticed, and this is me saying it, right, is that in a fair criticism or a fair observation of the vinyl community on YouTube is it's dominated in volume by older white guys, right? Like we could do a way better. We could do a significantly better job as a community of being more inclusive to people of color, to women. I know a couple of years ago there was a dust up about some controversy about women in the vinyl community don't know what they're talking about, all that kind of stuff, right? So how do you see it? Do you agree that we should be more inclusive and be more diverse? And then how do we get there? Because I try to, if it's a new channel, if it's a small channel, if it's a channel by a person of color or a woman or whatever, I do try, at least myself, this is my own practice, I do try to reach out and connect and comment and bring them along. But how would you view that whole experience? Do you think that's a fair criticism or observation?
Sort of. It's kind of funny that you say that because, two of the pioneers of this whole thing are black.
That's right, Derek. Yeah.
Brandon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Brandon too. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, I think it's really weird, and I think it's a false stereotype. Although it seems to be reality, it seems to be reality in the vinyl community. I think in terms of being a record collector in general, I think there's a false stereotype.
Sure.
And it's that it's just mostly older white guys. My dad certainly wasn't an older white guy.
Yeah, of course.
Neither am I. I mean, I'm half. My mom's Italian, and I'm like a dad's side black and Puerto Rican. But it seems that way on the vinyl community. I can be in any record store. I can be in Amoeba.
Yep.
And there's just as many Asian people as there are white people. There are just as many black people on the ground, sitting Indian style, digging underneath the bins, as there is white people. There's just as many girls in there as there is guys. It is male dominated. That is something that I don't think is a wrong cliche. It's definitely male dominated. But I think more and more women are doing it. I would like to see more and more women who, and I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. More and more women who really know what they're talking about.
Okay.
Because the females that I have noticed are millennial age girls who, God bless them, they're getting into it. Somebody in their family exposed them to it. Their dad, their mom, their uncle, their girlfriend's dad is a collector, whoever.
Yep.
And or maybe they stumbled across stuff online and they got interested in it. And however you want to get going, that's great. I fault no one. The more the better. We want people to be collectors and to be music aficionados so that the independent record store does not die. That's my main focus. And we can get into about that later. But I would like to see more women who really have a deep knowledge like a lot of the males do. And there's just, unfortunately, from my perspective, whoever's watching this, please don't flame me for this. It's just the truth. There's just not a lot of women who, quote unquote, know what they're talking about, to the extent that they feed me, because I'm looking to be fed,
okay,
or that interests me to the level that I feel there's camaraderie. I'll just name a couple who I think have a good knowledge of music and collecting. One is Rachel.
Sure.
Rachel goes. And the other would be Hannah.
Omaha. Okay. Yep.
Neither of them purport to be any expert. In fact, Hannah will tell you straight up, I'm not an expert. I've seen her put it on Instagram many times. I'm not an expert, but Hannah's got some fucking really good knowledge. Her tastes are a little more pinpointed in terms of the genres that she collects and listens to, but her knowledge within that is something that I respect and I've learned from. So, those two are two, and there could be more. I just don't follow a lot of the women. Just the same for guys.
Yeah. It's got to be reciprocal. You've got it. Like you use a good word, feed.
Right.
Like it's got to like nourish you or sustain you from a collecting lens, from a knowledge share, from like you said in the jump is learning things from people and be like, wow, that kind of vibe. Is that fair statement?
Fed. Yeah, being fed. And again, it goes the same for guys. It's just that there's more men than there are women. So
it's a numbers, right?
In juxtaposition is, it's light years apart. I would love to see more women who have a really deep knowledge, because I'm sure that there are a lot out there. I would just like
no
to
doubt.
See.
So you said this a couple times about your dad kind of being the collector that you were literally probably following around on some of his digs, his hunting for records. It's always interesting how people kind of get into this through oftentimes a family member, oftentimes a certain type of music or an artist that they really get into, right? So all that said, let's talk about like your actual collection and your collecting history, because you said you've been collecting very early on. Obviously, how did it start, and where do you find yourself now? Have you ever quantified like what your collection is, size-wise, records, CDs, you name it?
I collect primarily. I collect LPs and 7-inch singles. I collect cassette albums. I'm a huge proponent for audio tape. Coming from an audiophile or a stereophile standpoint, if you have an incredibly good deck, tape, and you have a very well produced and mastered cassette album, it will blow away any vinyl record. It will murder any vinyl record in comparison to that album. And taking it even a step further, if you have a reel-to-reel will murder any format, period. The reel-to-reel format has made a comeback, but unfortunately, it's so expensive.
Sure.
It's so massively expensive that only guys who can throw down $10,000 on a turntable. Now, I have a turntable that's worth $13,000, but did I pay $13,000 for it? No, because I don't have the money to pay $13,000 on a turntable.
Sure.
But guys who can just go write a check for that stuff, those are the guys who are collecting modern day, currently produced, and very sparsely produced new reel-to-reel albums. Those albums are going for $200, $300, $400, $500 an album.
Mm-hmm.
Just normal prices. So those, if anyone ever has the chance to listen to that format or to invest in a really high-end deck, which would be the most modern high-end Marantz decks, the most modern high-end Nakamichi decks, which would be mid to late 90s, maybe early 2000s max. Those decks right there, the Marantz SD72 Gold Series decks are one of the best decks you can ever buy. You get a great tape and you play it in that deck, it will blow away your entire vinyl collection. It's just, that's what tape is. It's unbelievable. So I collect all those formats, and then I collect little tiny things like I have a great flexi disc collection. Fascinated with flexi discs. Okay. I subscribe to things like, I don't know if you're familiar with Vinyl Post.
Not familiar.
Okay, so Vinyl Post is a flexi disc subscription service that puts flexi disc or puts a single on a postcard size flexi with all kinds of extras. And they launch new independent sort of dream pop rock, indie bands or indie groups or indie performers that this is their only exposure on a record, and they scour these artists and they release them through Vinyl Post. And it's great getting all of these new artists who are trying to do something on a record, and I get it in the mail every month. And I seek out, anytime I find a flexi disc in a record store, I snatch it up. So that's one thing. I also collect 3-inch compact disc singles, if you remember those.
Yeah, that's real old school. Interesting.
So I've been heavy into that for probably about 10 years because I had them as a kid when they were first out.
Sure.
The problem with that is they're massively expensive. I think they're exploited a bit, because I don't think that they should cost what they do, but you could spend anywhere from $15 to $150 on a 3-inch compact disc.
Sounds very niche, right? It's a certain type of buyer and listener. Yeah,
extremely niche, and I do it just for the collectability of it. I'm kind of getting into mini disc. I won't have that in the main part of my hi-fi system, but there is a lot of cool stuff put out on mini disc, and I'm trying to. I locked down a mini disc player I had a long time ago. I locked one down, and now I'm starting to kind of seek out mini disc, just as kind of like a little side thing,
Interesting.
But the main formats are, of course, vinyl LP, cassette album, compact disc album, and then I have a very choosy with my 12-inch singles. I do collect 12-inch singles, but they have to be either extremely nostalgic or be something that's very rare, and then I'll bring it into that. I have about LP wise right around 4,200 LPs, about 2,700 compact discs albums, about 800 cassette albums, and about a little over 1,000 7-inch 45 RPM singles.
Love it. I love hearing those numbers. That just means I got more room to climb.
Oh, and that's the beauty of it, man. I don't think that people realize the beauty, the pinnacle of beauty of being a collector or just collecting, and that is it will never end. I don't care how long you live, it will never, and how much money that you have, it will never end.
Yes, it's very ingrained. It's very a part of your psyche and part of your personality too, right? Like it could be, and sometimes,
well, yeah,
maybe we shift, right?
Yeah, but what I mean by never end is there's so much media out there that you could never collect it all. It would be impossible to collect it all. So it's a hobby that will never exhaust itself unless you yourself get tired of it.
That's fair. Yeah, I know when I got real serious about record collecting, particularly LPs, I had this really wild-haired idea that, because I love Huey Lewis and the News Sports. It's an album that when I was a kid, one of my first albums I can remember as a kid my mom had, and so I have that personal connection to it. So I really thought
that's a really good album. It's actually sonically and production-wise and writing-wise, it's really a fantastic record.
Yeah, but I didn't realize this going in, but this is back when you could get records for a song at flea markets, at antique places. So I thought early on, I'm like, I'm going to get every single copy of Huey Lewis and the New Sports, not realizing really what that entailed, and not also realizing they sold millions and millions of copies of that. So I've got a hearty start, but I don't think I'm going to ever. But you know what I mean? Like those kind of things, like really are. I laugh about it now, but at the time I was really ambitious. Like anytime I would see a copy, it's got to come home. But now, as prices have escalated, like that's just not reasonable. But anyway, no, I love it. So let's talk about kind of the crux of this conversation, what I'll call collecting from the inside. Okay. And for folks who have watched your channel or may not be familiar with your channel, you've got a wide range of experiences in the actual music industry. And I really want to lean in, and we'll get into the GOLDMINE stuff in particular, but if you could kind of just educate the audience, just a very high level, like what kind of stuff you've been involved in and stuff that you're really proud of, or things that people may not know about you.
We've discussed this before, obviously.
Yep.
And I'm not ashamed to let people know. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up. But before I started making videos, my entire YouTube channel was career-based. And when I decided to start to make YouTube vinyl community videos, I decided that I was going to pull all of that down, because contrary to popular belief, people who have been fortunate enough, if you want to call it that, to perpetuate a career in this business don't like talking about it. It's something that we do and hate to be questioned about. I agreed with you that we would talk about a little bit more problem, and the reason being is because sometimes it creates animosity.
Definitely.
It can create a situation where people think that you're being braggadocious, or you're trying to, for lack of better words, floss. You're trying to say, "Hey, look at me," and it's just better not talking about it, not bringing it up. In the entirety of the time that I've had my channel revolving around VC videos, I've mentioned it sporadically, extremely sporadically, only when it was relevant to something I was showing or something I was talking about. Other than that, other people have mentioned it more than I have. And it's just because I don't need the trolls, just being honest. I don't need the animosity. I don't need... Listen, I'm not going to name names, but there have been people... I'm not dumb. I'm a smart motherfucker. I really am. I'm extremely intuitive, and I'm very discerning, and I can tell when someone doesn't like me. And there's been quite a few people, not quite a few, there's been a tiny handful of people who have been very negative towards me because of what I've purported or what other people have purported that I do for a living. Coincidentally, those people are now people I get along with.
Interesting.
It's very interesting. And that just comes from finding some common ground and maybe making those people see that, hey, I'm not what you think I am, or I'm not who you think I am, or whatever. And then they begin to realize, hey, I like this guy. Hey, I have some common ground with this guy. Or maybe this guy wasn't full of shit because I looked him up, or maybe I see what he's done, and he really is doing that. Maybe people just didn't believe it. I thought I was just blowing smoke up people's ass, or other people were blowing smoke for me. That's why I haven't talked about it a lot. That being said, getting that out there, I'm in my, just hit my mid-40s. And I've been in, or almost my mid-40s, I've been a professional in this business since I was late 19s. I was in veterinary medicine from 17 to 19.
Oh,
Yeah, I was a surgical technician straight out of high school, because in high school I was a kennel assistant, and then I started assisting in things, and the doctor was like, "You have a knack for this, I'll pay for you to go to school. It's going to take about a year and a half, but I'll pay for you to get your license." I actually did it in a year. And I was a surgery tech. Growing up, ever since I was a young teen or even preteen, I knew what I wanted to do. I grew up in bands. I'm a vocalist primarily. I play piano and guitar. My first instrument was a woodwind instrument. I play flute.
Mm.
I play hand percussion. But primarily growing up was very early began to write songs, and even earlier than that, I sang. And so growing up, I was in bands. Towards the end of high school and out of high school, I was in groups that were opening up for, bands. I opened up for, even before I was 20, I opened up for Gap Band and R. Kelly and things like that. And I knew what I wanted to do. And it wasn't necessarily being an artist. It was just being in the industry. I just wanted to be in the industry that was making music. I wanted to be immersed in music and in the creation of music, whether it was an artist. And I really didn't even care about that, whether it was at a record label, whatever the case may be. I just wanted to be involved with those people. Being in the one day going from one hospital to another because I was going to pick up some supplies from a sister hospital. I'm driving through an industrial area to get there, and I look. This time I'm in North Los Angeles, and I look and I see this big stone sign outside of a big industrial building, and it says EMI Music Distribution North America. And so I was like, wow. Rushed to get what I had to get at the hospital, and I came back and I said, screw it. I mean, I was in scrubs, had a mask around my neck.
yeah.
And I went inside and I applied, not realizing that that's not how you get into that business. But I always knew. I studied about it. I read books about it. I mean, as a teen, as a sophomore, a junior, a senior in high school, I was just reading everything I could get my hands on to understand that business.
Mm.
And I didn't understand how you got in. I just understood I wanted to be there. So when I went in, I asked for an application, not realizing that's not how you get in. But being a California business, they had to have, by law, they had to have applications. And so I filled one out. Blindly, just did it. Long story short, within a month and a half, I was at 19 going on 20. I ended up being the executive assistant to the president of national distribution, which was a female at the time, not realizing why she hired me. It wasn't because I was the best at administration, even though I kicked ass. I ran her office like it was nobody's business. I mean, I was I was like, hey, I'm in, and I wasn't going to let anything sidetrack me. From that, I went on to labels. I've headed labels. I was at EMI Records America when EMI Records America was still here in the United States. Now it's just back in the UK or in all over Europe, but it's not here anymore. Doing marketing and promotions with the Capitol Records, marketing and promotions, eventually in A&R. Priority Records, which is a hip hop label. Yep. Owned by Capitol, Ice Cube and all that stuff. There I was associate national director of A&R in my 20s. I was an executive at a record label by the time I was 21 years old.
Wow.
This is weird. But, in that industry, it's common. It was common. And then I ended up going to a label that eventually got hit by a merger. It was a subsidiary under Universal Music Group. It's actually subsidiaried under MCA. It was Silas Records, and it was an R&B label, and it had people like Shantae Moore, Aaron Hall, Jesse Powell, who were really popular back then. Seagram's of Canada ended up purchasing Universal Music Group. So there was a huge merger. From there, I was offered a position at MCA I didn't want to take because it was kind of going backwards. They wanted to give me a position heading urban marketing and promotions, and I didn't want to do that. And so at the time, I was dating somebody on a sitcom, and I was always the sitcom filmed every Thursday. And for people who have never been to a sitcom taping, the way that they film sitcoms or tape sitcoms is they tape once in the morning, and then they tape the exact same show at night. And then they take the best of those two tapings, and that's how you get a show. Okay. And so I was there every Thursday night. It was the last season of this particular show, and which I won't name. And the executive producer of the show was a huge record executive. He was the president or the former president of one of the major record labels, and this was his show. And he had since then opened a massive artist management firm. He was a huge artist manager. And so I knew him, and he had asked me what I was going to do after the merger. And I told him what I was offered, and I didn't want to do it, so maybe I would just shop myself as an A&R somewhere else. Asked me if I thought that I would be interested in artist management, and I was not. In fact, it just was, in my mind, it was like suicide. It's like I knew what artist managers went through, and I just wasn't going to do it.
No thanks, sure.
And and he says, I need someone to come and run the music division at his management firm. Am I interested? But I would have to then also co-manage the artists that he was personally handling. The artists that he was personally handling were four of the world's top recording artists at the time. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm not going to babysit artists, especially of that caliber.
Oh, sure.
I'm not going to do it. The offer was extended for a few days. If you're not in my office by this coming Monday, then forget it. Thank you, but I'm not interested. And over the weekend, I got called every name by every person I knew. I'm a dummy. I'm an idiot if I don't take this job. Stupidest thing I've ever heard, Tone. If you don't take this, you're a dummy. And so I ended up showing up on Monday, and that led me into an almost 7-year stint with that company, and then subsequently after that with my own management firm that I stupidly launched because I don't know why I continued to manage artists. Because I was seated in the industry now as an artist manager who had a lot of clout, and that I could get in wherever I wanted to get in. So I figured I might as well just perpetuate it and open my own firm because I didn't want to be at the firm I was at anymore. There was just a lot of clashing going on. So I opened my own firm, and about 7 years, almost 8 years after that, I got tired of babysitting recording artists, even with my own firm. I just got tired of it. I had some pretty notable artists. I really was focusing on myself as a songwriter and a producer. I had already been published, quite a few times. I'd had some successes. I'd had some things that were successes in terms of status, but that I was very badly stabbed in the back about, losing a lot of money. And so I stopped managing artists, and I I transformed my management firm into a production company, which is now Music. If you look at any of my logos online or stuff, it's Music Life Enterprises Limited, and that is my production company. And I've just been writing and producing ever since. And that's about
Awesome.
it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because I know that I love hearing stuff like that, but I also like you said, that I think it's to everyone's own discretion what they want to open up themselves to in terms of people who don't know and that sort of thing. So I appreciate you sharing that. But one thing within that is, I alluded to it earlier. The gold. So you're a contributing editor to GOLDMINE also, right? And and obviously people who collect records. I mean, GOLDMINE is synonymous. I mean, is it the oldest collecting because it's got a long history within the hobby.
Yeah, so even Rolling Stone back then had sections for collecting, where Rolling Stone was more focused on industry news and slightly about putting ads in for records and stuff like that. And GOLDMINE was just the opposite. It was more focused on the collector and then some industry news. Rolling Stone launched in '67 and GOLDMINE launched in 1974. And today they're the two longest living music publications in the world. What I mean, Cream is back, and Cream is older than Goldmine, but Cream went away for 20
But yeah, it
years.
hasn't been consecutive. Yeah, exactly. It's a rebirth or a rebrand or what have you. But Goldmine's been around. I mean, there's been no interruption.
It's perpetuated continuously, and it's never declined. It's never lessened itself. It's always grown and grown and grown and grown, and it's remained faithful to music. Where Rolling Stone, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I've written for Rolling Stone once. I'll never do it again. Rolling Stone is a fucking political rag. That's all it is. It's an absolute political rag, and it's become a joke.
Sure.
In regards to music.
No,
in the same way that MTV became a joke in regards to music, Rolling Stone is the MTV of publications.
That's fair. That's fair criticism for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's garbage. Absolute garbage. I wish it wasn't, because it was a great magazine.
Well, definitely.
It was an absolute fantastic magazine. It's the biggest music magazine in the world. It's in multitude of countries, published in multitudes of languages.
Yep.
And kudos for that. But you're not a music magazine anymore. You
like a pop culture magazine, if anything, right?
Pop culture magazine, and you moonlight as a political rag, but that just kind of puts a big stain on the magazine, in my opinion, as a music fan. Not as an industry person, but as a fan. Goldmine has never done that. It is always been consistent with being 100% music based. And the cool thing about Goldmine is it brought in a lot of freelance writers, a lot of feature writers that aren't technically part of the magazine, but they're just freelance feature writers. And then there's staff, which are staff writers and then contributing editors. Staff writers are writers that are on staff that the editor-in-chief says, hey, we need to write about this. I'm giving it to you. Contributing editor, which there's a small handful of them, can write whatever they want, and it's not questioned. But what the editor, Patrick Prince, has done, or the editor-in-chief, is he's brought on a super diverse collection of contributing editors. Now, especially with my columns, not only write about classic artists, classic rock, classic soul, jazz, blah, 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 but have brought in writers to write about current artists, so that it's not just the old stuff that we're reading about. It's the majority of the magazine, but now there's information and there's publishing of things that are current artists. Hip hop. They brought me in to write about hip hop. They brought me in to write about modern soul. They brought me in to write about a niche that the magazine was based off of, and that is record collecting.
Yeah, because you have, if and correct me if I'm wrong, so you have two biweekly columns. You have one called The Tone of Soul, exactly kind of what you're talking about. Then also Adventures of a Music Collector. So you're hitting, like, it sounds like two areas that Goldmine really needed a little bit of elevation or observation, right?
Well, there was nothing really being focused on when it came to urban music. And so The Tone of Soul was established to write about anything urban-based soul, and not just modern, everything soul, because the magazine had always lacked in that genre, in black music. I hate saying black because technically rock is black music. It's based all off black music.
Yeah, rhythm and blues. Yep.
If you want to get technical, the first rock artists were Little Richard, Ike Turner, and Chuck Berry. It's black music. It's all, I mean, blues rock is all black music. It was never hidden. They loved calling themselves following after black artists. But nevertheless, there's genres, and genres are more, they attract one race or another. The magazine was lacking a lot in soul, or in urban music, or black music, whatever you want to call it. And so I was brought in to write about classic soul, modern soul, different genres, album reviews in that genre, anything that pertains to that, trying to build up hip-hop and mostly focusing on real hip-hop. You'll never see the magazine publish anything about any of most of the modern artists today, because it's just not hip-hop. There's a great handful of modern hip-hop artists that I will definitely be highlighting that stay true to the form.
Sure.
To this day. new artists that stay true to the form. Those artists will absolutely be getting exposed. But and then Adventures of a Music Collector was to talk about anything and everything that interests the music collecting lifestyle, and that's what that is.
Yeah, I mean, some of the pieces I've read, I've read samples of both columns, right? And in terms of some of my favorite stuff, like you do some review pieces too. Like you just recently reviewed the what was it, the Watt Stacks box set that just came out from Kraft. You reviewed the Michael Jackson Mo-Fi Thriller a few months ago. And even, like one column I like that you did was ways of uncovering different ways to discover new music, where you're talking about discovering new music, because 20 years ago I was big into new music and going to the nether regions of the internet, and that's still an option through YouTube. But you listed out a lot of, very similar to how we began this conversation, of sharing information, and I think these columns are an extension of that. And one thing that some folks in the audience may know is back in October, well, even before that, you started planning, but you had an article about why the YouTube vinyl community is music collecting's heartbeat, which kind of is a direct connection to what we started this conversation with, which was being inclusive, shedding light on the vinyl community on YouTube, all these kind of things. And I think that particular piece, and you, full disclosure, you did ask me to submit a photo with many others. I mean, there was a litany of folks, Brandon, and we talked about before, and even some channels I wasn't even familiar with that helped elevate their profile, or at least awareness, that I then went and discovered some new channels there. So one, thank you for doing that. But two, I think it speaks to you in terms of that connection that we were talking about the YouTube piece in the beginning, that this is another way to facilitate that kind of exposure and also that connective piece. So it's really cool that you're doing that for GOLDMINE, did that for GOLDMINE, and that piece for the community and so forth.
Well, I did that piece because the vinyl community is probably the most important entity that fed the resurgence of vinyl record production. I really honestly and truly believe that without the VC, and I mean this without any shadow of a doubt, not blowing smoke at all, if it wasn't for the vinyl community, the chances of the industry seeing the lucrative possibilities of really going full force in vinyl record production again would have probably, maybe it would have happened, maybe not. But I can guarantee you one thing, that the vinyl community was the biggest catalyst for that.
Gasoline on the fire, no doubt. Yep, 100%. I agree with you on that.
Because there's nowhere in the world, not with any music publication, not even with publication being also having a massive online presence, which GOLDMINE does, which Rolling Stone does, Mojo does, things like that. Record Collector UK, things like that. Shindig is even decent, but not even with any of those things combined, physical publications and online presence, could they have even initiated anything like the vinyl community, because the vinyl community, it's so massively viral. It was so massively viral that the industry had no choice but to recognize it, had no choice but to act upon it. And there's good and bad out of that. I mean, I remember, and I hope I'm not getting off track, but I remember when Record Store Day first launched. I was so excited about it. And because of that camaraderie, because it was just a day to be there and be around other collectors, the same way that we're around other collectors online with the VC. There's that chance to really just, and honor, because I've always been a champion for the independent record store, especially those stores that never went away. They perpetuated themselves through a dead spot that was almost, it was like, how did you last? And it was because they did whatever they could to continue to attract people who wanted to collect vinyl, and they stayed around. And I think that's another entity that without the independent record store, we would just die. It's the spirit of collecting.
Yes.
And they deserve to be honored, because that's what really has kept all of this alive. Music stores, record stores is what has kept us alive for decades and decades and decades. Anyway, getting back to the VC, even when Record Store Day started, which I was very happy about, I even saw, now it's, and I'm going to say it now, I'm the biggest proponent against it. Every year that it happens, I'll post shit to totally denounce it. Like, and you can call me a dick, you can call me the devil, I don't care what you call me. But Record Store Day is the biggest travesty now towards record store owners. Serves them not. It serves the major music conglomerates, and I fault Record Store Day for that because they fell for the bait. The record store conglomerates saw what the VC was perpetuating, and then they saw the birth of Record Store Day, and they totally exploited it. And Record Store Day could have said, no, we're not going to do that. But they saw dollar signs, and that's all that mattered. I know a billion record store owners. And I don't care what any record store owner says, oh, no, it's good for the store. No, it's not. You lose money. You lose, you lose, you lose. You can't participate in it if you're not spending X amount of dollars. It's absolute communism in regards to the music collecting world. It's exactly what communism is to politics and society as is to music collecting, because it's just not beneficial to the independent record store where it was supposed to be in the beginning. And because of the VC and the popularity, that's the one negative thing. The major music, conglomerates, they took advantage of that. They turned it to their financial advantage.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism, namely because exactly what you're talking about. 10 years ago, it felt more communal, and now it feels more transactional, right? And so I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
We stand in line, or I don't do it anymore. It's not to say that I don't like RSD product. I love RSD product.
Sure.
But I'm not going to contribute to it. I do go in. I do go to Record Store Day. I don't stand in line because I'm there to. I'll go and spend any money that I was going to spend on RSD. I spend it on used records and product in the store. That's what I do because that's where they make their money.
That's right. Particularly on used product. Yep.
Absolutely. And I encourage people. I fly a banner every Record Store Day. I fly a banner on all my social media that says, if you're going to support Record Store Day, set aside some of your budget to spend on used records. I'm not saying don't go and support Record Store Day. Go if that's what you want to do. I'm not denouncing anyone for it. Great. But save some of your Record Store Day product money for other products. Make it a balance because that really helps out your independent record store. But it's a cattle call. You stand in line like you're being prodded. You're being prodded like cattle. You go in like a mindless robot. You grab your stuff and then they usher you out. Unless you want to stand around and spend money on other things, but you've already blown your wad.
Yeah.
Gone. And so you leave. That doesn't benefit the record stores because they work their asses off, man.
Oh, for sure.
They work their butts off to be prepared. They spend so much money, and they rarely ever recoup any of all.
It's hard,
all
yeah.
It. They just don't.
Hard.
They just don't. But the VC's been great for everything else, but I think it's the thing that I'll also encourage the conglomerates to take advantage of record store.
For sure. Well, Talon, I could keep talking to you for a long time. I really enjoy this conversation. Hopefully, you've enjoyed it too. For the sake of time, we'll go ahead and wind it down. But sincere thank you for taking this time, sharing part of your story. Because I know before we talked a little bit about this, and I know there's some apprehension about sharing some of your professional side. So I appreciate you taking the viewer or the listeners to on this journey, but also like educating me too on a lot of the stuff you've been through. But also, GOLDMINE. I mean, we said this at the beginning, and we're even saying it here at the end, is the connection and connecting with like-minded collectors. It's the best part of this whole deal. And so that's brought me to get to know you better, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. I love that you're doing this. I love that you're doing this, and I think that your format's awesome. I will say two things just really quickly.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just going to mention them, and I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to let them manifest so everyone can enjoy it. Stay tuned for GOLDMINE TV.
Interesting. Okay.
Working out the details with the magazine, or Project M Media, which is the publishing company that owns GOLDMINE, working out GOLDMINE TV. It will be YouTube based.
Nice.
It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be like nothing you guys have ever seen. And then also, if anyone's ever watched my channel, I started a series a while ago called Record Store Spotlight, where I do a point of view.
Yeah, I had a note. I wanted to touch on it. It's such an awesome series.
I do a point of view series where I introduce a record store, because again, I'm a champion for the independent record store. Introduce a record store. I do a point of view walkthrough. I interview in point of view form, like you're there with me. Talk to the managers, talk to the owners, talk about the shop, and then I go back to the studio and talk about what I picked up. I've kind of slacked off on that, not on purpose, because Record Store Spotlight has been all of the original episodes are being re-edited with the new branding. I have a lot of episodes in the can, and it's going to have its own channel.
Oh, cool, real cool.
So we're going to have Record Store Spotlight channel. The channel's already up. It's private now until I get everything uploaded. And there's going to be a lot of traveling.
Love it.
And I have a series coming on called Extended Edition, where we'll talk about the deep history of some record stores that are very notable and have a really deep history. And then there's a special edition called Celebrity Edition, where I will have some of your favorite sports figures, actors, recording artists walking through with me, and then talking about the records that we pick up after the point of view part of the show. So, and I have a slew. I'll just name a few people who are going to be doing it with me. Fido de la Parra from Canned Heat is going to be doing it with me. Kendra Morris is going to be doing it with me. David Lee Roth is going to be doing it.
Wow.
Mike Inez from Alice in Chains is going to be doing it with me. Who else is going to be doing it with me? A few actors that I know. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. And the reason why it's getting its own channel, and the channel will be monetized. I don't monetize my channel. The channel will be heavily monetized. And the reason is because I have just obtained finally the trademark and the copyright to something called I Heart Record Stores.
Interesting.
And it's going to greatly benefit where Record Store Day lost it. I Heart Record Store is going to be picking up the ball. And I have hundreds of record stores already behind this project. Hundreds of record stores all across the country behind the project. So look out for those things, and it's going to be super cool stuff. Super cool stuff.
Been in the game for 20 plus, and you're still coming up on new stuff, man. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's exciting stuff. I appreciate you sharing it here.
You have to, or you die.
Adapt or die. That's right. Mark Parker at Nike told me that. Yep.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, again, Tone, thanks for the time, man. I really appreciate it, and hope maybe we can do this again another time. We can talk on some other topics, because I love picking your brain, man.
I'm at your disposal. I love what you're doing, bro.
Perfect. Appreciate you. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for tuning into another Vinyl Community Podcasts episode.
And that was another trip around the turntable. Thanks for listening to Vinyl Community Podcasts.